welcome, Bolts.
Thanks, Barbie. And yeah, those tantrums, I think you've been privy to a handful of them back in the day.
So we've been mates for a while, talking about doing a podcast for far too long without actually doing it. Although I still needed to stalk you, and I definitely did stalk you, found out a few things like hip-hop dancing career, which I know nothing about. And the other thing is that I didn't know that you only started playing competitive cricket at 15. Is that right?
Yeah. So literally when I first started playing cricket, it was at MLC, the school that I went to. And I had nothing prior besides the old backyard cricket with the brothers. So it was actually a really unusual intro into cricket and not really traditional from, a lot of the girls playing boys cricket, never played boys cricket. So straight into the female space.
And then at 16, so you started playing at 15, but at 16 you were already making your debut for the Fury. You must have been pretty bloody good. And then soon after, you're already in the Australian under-23 squad. How do you think those formative years actually shaped you? Because going into a high-performance environment immediately, that's not a usual story. Most people apply their trade in the grade cricket area, even if they're an underage female teams, but you've gone straight to the top almost. How do you think that affected you at the time?
I think if I had my time over again, I would have probably preferred to be in a high performance setup a little bit later on, probably when I was a bit more mature and knew myself as a person and as a cricketer. But sometimes opportunities come and you just got to roll with the punches. And I think where I got lucky being over here in WA is we don't have a lot of talent that's spread far and wide. So I think when they sort of see someone that shows a little bit, they sort of throw them in, and that was me in those years. And I think it was really tough because I was playing with a lot of actual women. So that was a bit interesting as a 16-year-old coming into an environment where everyone was in their mid to late 20s or 30s. So I certainly had to grow up pretty quickly.
And you've always been someone that's really driven. So I can't imagine that would have really intimidated you too much. Was it more so that it really drove you to work really hard straight away? So was that work ethic there from the start?
I wouldn't say it was there from the start. I always joke about my relationship with fitness as a 15-year-old and 16-year-old, and it was pretty terrible. I think if I think back to my club cricket days, my mum used to chuck in a Snickers bar and a Mars bar in the esky that would come out for drinks. So I'd be that kid that would be having a sugar fix during the drinks break rather than rehydrating. So look, I wasn't really driven, but I knew that I was good at cricket. So I think for me, it was just about being there purely based on potential. And it probably wasn't until I had that opportunity in the under-23s for Australia that I realised that was a little bit of work to do within the fitness area. And I think I've probably got Avril Faye to thank for that. I just remember her taking me down to Newman College, which is where we used to train for club, and she'd have me running from pillar to pillar and trying to cut me into shape. And if you know Avril pretty well, and she's a bit of a hard lady, so to have someone like her in my early years, I think really turned things around for me.
Right. So you did go pretty hard and hit that first stage of burnout. So this is a theme that we'll see regularly throughout your career. When you hit 18, 19, you actually stepped away from the game. So what happened there?
Yeah, so I guess like I've alluded to earlier, getting involved in playing cricket as a 15-year-old, was a great experience, but it also led to cricket being a massive part of my life over those next few years. And I think when I was about 18, I sort of came back from an Aussie camp, and I was playing 19s. I was playing for the Fury at the time, and everything was just about cricket. And I think it just got to the point where I just hated it, and everyone was always on my back about this untapped potential. Where is it, and what are you doing with cricket? And I think I just sort of sat back and was like, I actually don't want to do this. I hate it. I want nothing to do with cricket. And I think I was showing a few behaviour things that was a really poor reflection of of myself as well. So I think I made that decision to sort of step away and have a break and get my head into something else to sort of bring a little bit of a spark back into my life.
Right, it's something we see a lot, and a lot of the cricketers that I'm working with at the moment are in that 16 to 20 age group, and it's the word potential is thrown around so much, and it can be a positive thing, but it also sounds like it can be a negative thing where you're like, oh, I'm meant to get there. Am I not enough as I am? And to be honest, that's the crux of it, and that's the crux of the issue. So you start looking for things externally and like, okay, how do I prove myself? Or the alternative is, nah, I've had enough. Let's step away. So what did that period of your life look like when you stepped away? What were you doing? Who was around you? Like, what did that look like?
I think Steve Philippi was our coach at the time, and I remember sort of saying to him that I was going to step away, and he was pretty supportive and obviously said, you know, if I ever made the decision to come back to cricket to touch base and you know, discuss what a return to the program would look like. But I think at that stage I was well and truly off the cricket radar. I just wanted to do something different. I was always a bit of a late bloomer, so I decided to go to uni. So you know, I sort of put a bit of my energy into actually starting a degree. So I did a uni prep course and then enrolled into the degree that I ended up getting in sport management. So it wasn't as though I, you know, gave up cricket and I was doing nothing. I was able to fill the space, and I got into AFL and I fell in love with that game. So, you know, I ended up playing that from when I was 18 for another 5 years, and I met some of my best mates playing for Coastal Titans. So I think to be able to step away from cricket and be involved in a different sport with a different group of people really added some joy back into my life. And I think I've got a lot to thank for my brother, or both brothers actually, during that time to get me to stick out doing uni and also to start doing some work. So I've always worked as well. So I was doing little jobs here and there. So, you know, I was able to actually feel that time.
What do you think the difference was between AFL and cricket in terms of why you really enjoyed AFL and at the same time you're hating on cricket, where essentially they're both sports that you're meant to have fun and enjoy?
It's a really tough one, and I still say to people that in terms of passion levels, like I know I'll throw netball into that. Netball, cricket, and AFL is where my passion is. And the thing that I loved about AFL, it's a team sport, and I always say to people, yeah, like cricket's a team sport, and you know, there's two teams going at it, but it is so heavily reliant on your individual skill. And I think being a batter, it's even more reliant on the fact that you have to perform, and you're performing under pressure, and sometimes you only get one crack at it. So to be able to come back and impact the game and not take things as seriously if they don't come off, it's actually really hard to do in the cricket environment. Whereas in AFL, you might have, you know, did an error, like hand pass or fluffed a kick, but that's not the end of the world, and you get another chance to have a crack and impact the game. And it just feels as though the physical side and the fitness component of it was, you know, really challenging, and I really liked that. So I think from that sense, they're two sports that offer really different understandings of what a team sport is. And I think for me personally, I really love that enjoyment of being a part of a team.
It's a really interesting one because it's something that I've often wondered is how are we getting it wrong at a high performance level, especially in cricket? Are we getting it wrong where we're just measuring, everything's on measurables? We're ticking a lot of boxes, there's a lot of numbers. We celebrate those that are perfect. It just seems like there's a lot of issues at the moment in the mental side of the game where there's a lot of players pulling out. And cricket, men, female, amateur, professional, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of issues in performance anxiety. And I just wonder if our obsession with numbers and ticking boxes in cricket in comparison to AFL or netball, where it's a lot more free flowing, has an impact. Do you think there's much to that?
Yeah, I've never been involved in a sport that chases perfection like cricket does. And I think That's half the issue. I watch young girls now come into the high performance environment and they get so upset at themselves if they're unable to actually execute their skills. And this is in an environment where they're currently under no pressure. So, you know, you add in the pressure of the game, and how they're feeling about themselves as a cricketer, then that could actually escalate to them feeling basically like shit about themselves and what they're offering the team. And it can be really derailing for a lot of younger players. And sometimes it's quite hard to watch. And I always feel as though I think you've got it completely right. When we talk about cricket and the environment, we're always, you know, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, and these are your numbers and these are your stats, and this is the type of player we want you to be. No one actually sits down and asks, well, what type of player do you want to be, and what does success look like for you? And go and actually celebrate that. It's more like, well, this player's doing this, how can we get you to emulate what they're doing? Because that's success. So it's a really interesting sort of environment to be a part of. And that's why you just, you know, I see players burn out or take time away from the game. And most of it is because they put so much pressure on themselves to attain this perfection that sometimes is actually, it's like non-existent, and no one is becoming that comfortable in their skin as a player. And then you add on, I guess, and more so in the men's and maybe in the Aussie women's, that scrutiny that comes with performance. And that's a new space that is going to start to impact the female environment as well. And it's a bit of an issue, because if people are feeling insecure about themselves as a person, as a player, you add in the scrutiny that is going to be around performance or even giving constructive feedback. You know, are these kids equipped enough to be able to handle that? I'm not sure.
How do you manage that as an individual? So say you're under pressure, you haven't performed in a while, the media's going nuts, your coach is, more often than not, it's all internal, but your coach is saying something, there's all sorts of things going on, maybe some personal life issues. You're someone that's consistently, irrelevant of how you're going off the field, you find a way to perform. And that's something that I've not seen in many people. How do you manage yourself on the field, firstly, if all that pressure is happening off the field?
Yeah, I used to say to my psych all the time that success for me for so many years was operating at a really unhealthy manner, because I would need to be under significant duress away from the game to then step over that white line and then go and perform, because it was the only time that I felt I was in control of my life, in terms of I make that step over the line, I walk, and I know that for the next, well, hopefully 3 hours of my life, I'm just focusing on that ball and I'm working in a partnership with the person down the other, and life's just simple. Which is a really unusual way to look at stuff, because normally people need things away from cricket to be able to operate well on the field. But for so many years, I had this unhealthy relationship around putting myself under extreme duress to be able to go out and perform.
That's fascinating. Like it's so different to your normal mindset, but I think there's a lot to take out of that, in the fact that you said simplicity, control, one ball at a time, and those are the same things that help us in general life, but it's so hard to be able to actually do that. So it's easy to say that, but to be able to actually do that is really, really difficult. And it's just something I noticed, like before you took a break from the game in 2018, I think it was, and there was a Big Bash game and you got player of the match in that game, 50 odd, we were 3-0 out at Lilac Hill, and literally 5 minutes later you were in tears and couldn't quite function off the field. But the ability to perform at the highest level and arguably the best domestic competition in the world straight before is pretty unreal. So I just want to read something out actually for a second, which I wrote, which pretty much sums up your Australian cricket career. So it says, over the next 6 years, you create a bubble, the cricket bubble. You begin to define yourself and your self-worth through cricket. Who am I if I'm not playing for Australia? Who am I if I'm not making 100 every time I go out to bat for Australia? The perfectionist Nicole arises again. And as you begin to make cricket your life, you lose sight of yourself as a person. You become fixated on trying to stay in the Australian team instead of enjoying the thrill of the ride and learnings from it. You continue to compare yourself to the best players in the team and are continually disappointed that you can't reach their heights. That's something that you wrote for A Stitch in Time, which are a great organisation. And I thought it was fascinating to get an insight into you as Nicole Bolton. Everyone's seeing from an external point of view as this really successful Australian cricketer. You were scoring runs, you were taking wickets, you were probably at the height of your career. Yet you had all these internal battles. How did that play out for you off the field?
Yeah, it's really unusual because, and I've said this to you so many times before, like I actually don't see what people see. And I really struggled to take compliments or, it actually makes me feel quite uncomfortable. And when people talk about my career for Australia and stuff, like sometimes the only things that I think about is, well, like I wish I did more. And then I will go through and work out, well, I really stuffed up an opportunity there. Like I should have done this, this, and this. And I never just sit and accept it for what it is and go like, shit, that was one hell of a ride. Or, and like the process in my mind has always been about like, it's not enough. And I think, like I was saying to you, I'm like searching for this unattainable perfection and this player that isn't there. Like I've never been comfortable in myself as a person. I've had a lot of struggles with that in my younger years, and I think that insecurity has definitely then come out into my cricket and going, well, I can't do what she does, so I mustn't be good enough. Instead of going, well, I can still get the same result, but I do it this way. And it can be, when you brought up that game against Thunder and that mindset that I was in leading into that, I was in serious duress, like leading into that final game. And I think the overwhelming of emotion on that day was the fact that I knew that was going to be my last game and potentially it could have been my last competitive cricket game. Like I just didn't know. And I think it was an overwhelming feeling that I was walking away from something that I actually really enjoyed doing. And I think my performances on that day was more around, it's the first time I just literally relinquished all that pressure and just went out and played. And people asked me like, what were you thinking during it? And I was like, I actually can't tell you what happened. And all I know was what was in the scorebook or what happened at the end of the game. But moments and headspace I was in, I was just so far from thinking about the actual situation that it was almost like I was having an out-of-body experience.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because we talk so much about get your head in the game, whereas sometimes having your head out of the game produces the best performances. But in this case, it wasn't necessarily a positive way of going about that because you had worked yourself into such a rut. What would you say were the main things that contributed to getting to that place? Because we've kind of gone from, okay, we're taking a break from cricket at 19, 20. You've come back into cricket. You've worked your butt off for a number of years, had a really good Australian career, went out towards the back end of it and found yourself needing to take a break again due to mental health reasons this time. What happened in that space?
I think my battles with mental health have been going on since 18, to be honest with you. And I think they've always sort of just hit their ugly head and just stayed away because my validation as a person was coming through cricket. And like I said, things came easy to me. Like I was young when I first went and made my WA debut, and then everything just sort of fell into place. So this ugly head of depression and anxiety and mental health never really came through because I never really gone through severe adversity. And I wouldn't really call not performing or being dropped or dealing with that as real life hard shit and adversity. So I think what really contributed to that was the breakup that I went through. You know, my relationship after 5 years ended, and I think even throughout that period, I definitely had my battles behind closed doors as well. But again, you sort of just like put it to the side and move on, because you're like, well, I've got to get ready for this tour, or I'm doing this, or you create this unrealistic life because it's easy rather than actually dealing with the crux of the issues. So, you know, if we're talking, that's bloody 10 or 12 years, that's 10 years of me ignoring shit that's been bubbling under the surface. And I guess it's taken an event like that where I've gone, actually, this is really not going to have a good effect, and I actually need to start to address it. So I think the trigger was obviously the breakup, but I honestly reckon that it's been something that I've been dealing with for a number of years.
Right. And how have you gone about actually dealing with it? Because I know you've been really proactive in this space. So although it's been going on for a long time, you're probably more proactive than most people I know in terms of getting help. And what was the first step? When did you first notice it? How did you go about dealing with it?
I think the first year of Big Bash, and I was captaining at the time, and I was not okay. I was really all over the shop, and I think it got to the end of that season, and our PDM at the time had sort of been aware that I was struggling a little bit, and my partner also, I think, was getting a little bit concerned and speaking to our PDM about maybe it might be a time to reach out and get some help. And that's when I first sat down with my psych and actually met him and developed a relationship. And I think at the time then we sort of put it more down to burnout, because I had a lot of symptoms around energy levels and fatigue and stuff that was probably a bit more conducive towards that burnout. But I think over time, there'd been elements that were sort of going into the depressive manner. When I got diagnosed with depression and anxiety in 2018, the anxiety part was really interesting one for me, because I would say that, you know, when I think of anxiety, I think of performance anxiety, and I'm like, that's not me. Like I've performed under pressure. Like I've been in absolute shit headspaces and been able to come through. I would say that anxiety is something that I'm not familiar with. So, and I'm always someone that needs answers. So initially, when I was sitting down with my psych and doctor, it was trying to understand both of those aspects, like what is depression and what elements do I actually feel as though I really feel, and what is the anxiety, and what am I experiencing in that space. So I wanted to do a lot of research, and when I found this out, I almost wanted answers, like everyone does, because, you know, you always think that like this is happening because of this, like, and you want to know why. So I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people in the mental health space, talking to my doctor, and also just being really mindful of how I was tracking, and if there was any sort of abnormalities within my moods, or if something triggered me, what was that. And the whole self-discovery phase of my life begun, and it's been a really interesting journey. And I talk to you about it all the time, because I'm always like, I got no idea what I'm doing, or like what to do, or how I'm feeling. But I've actually done a lot of self-discovery, and there's a lot of information that I've obtained, but I still definitely don't know the answers to how to manage it effectively.
Well, in terms of tools, like I think you hit the nail on the head. In self-discovery is the answer in a way, but the hard part is that when you go on the journey of self-discovery, you almost end up with more questions sometimes, and
Yeah.
it ends up being this big circle. But in terms of tools of how you actually manage that process, I know you're really good at, say, journaling, meditation, you do a bit of yoga. So your sustainers, what do they look like?
Yeah, so one of the massive things that my psych gets me to do, and sometimes I know when I'm not traveling really well, I go away from doing my sustainers, and one of them is writing, and it's putting aside some thinking time at the end of the day to really hone in on how I was feeling, was the things throughout the day that may have triggered me, and not necessarily analyzing that, but just sitting with it, accepting it, and then being able to move on from that. And I think I've always found it quite challenging being that in tune with my feelings, because I actually think I'm quite an emotional person, and sometimes it can be quite confronting. So I think being able to have an open mind with a tool like that is pretty important. And then I think another thing for me is just getting outdoors and going for a walk. So I just remember when I was at my best on my return to really good health, I would go for an hour to an hour and a half walks along the coast. I chuck in my headphones and listen to podcasts, and I felt as though listening to podcasts and educating myself on and other people's mental health experiences made me feel like I wasn't alone, but also that there was a lot of things in common that I had with a lot of people that I could have, they might be doing something that's helped them, and then that allows me to trial that and see if that works as well. And I think that was a really good thing that I got into, is just, especially being so close to the beach, it was just an easy thing to do. And yoga, I mean, you and I finally got together and did a bloody beginner's course. So I think that was good for me, because you actually came and picked me up. And I think if I had been left to do that off my own devices, I think it would have been another thing that I would have put to the back burner and be like, oh, I'll get back to it. But I think we were proper yogis there for a fair few months, and I honestly, I think I've had this conversation with you, but those first few sessions of like doing yoga, like I was like, all these emotions were coming over me, and I found myself like teary, and it was almost like I was cleansing myself emotionally and like letting my body relax and feel. And it was the most bizarre experience that I've had. And it was almost like starting that healing process, because it was really soon, it was really quickly after my breakup had basically been finalized. So I found as much as Craig was good, like yoga was really useful for me.
That's really interesting, and it's something not many people talk about. It's just probably because we don't understand a lot about it. The spiritual, emotional world, kind of dabble in it. Woo-woo is a word that gets, or Zen and wanky, there's all sorts of weird words that get thrown around, but it is real, and it is something that, yeah, as I said, we can't really describe, but the cleansing experience of whatever it is, and I think everyone has to find their own thing of whatever it is that actually helps them access that. And it's the solution of most people that have gone through mental health issues or grief, anything. They always find that something bigger than themselves to rely on. And that's what, I don't know about you, but I found with yoga, it's almost like every time you went there, you were away from the world, but at the same time, it's probably the only time you're really present and connected with it. And by being present and connected with what's immediately around you, the energy in the room, like, it's hard to put into words, isn't it? How it actually cleanses.
Yeah. I just remember that one session we did, and remember that guy ran it, and it was on a Monday, and Karen wasn't there, and he took it, and it was just a really powerful session. And I was like looking around, and I was like, we're just in a room full of absolute people we don't even know. Like we're connecting with 20 people that we've never met before, and everyone is moving and flowing in the same manner and releasing energy. And then I look around, and I know I've said this to you, is how cool would it be to actually get an understanding of like what's people's motivation to do yoga, and everyone's got a story. So what does yoga bring to that person might be different to this person. And I just caught myself looking around the room, and people were just so present with what they were doing that it was actually a really cool moment. And yeah, it's just funny because you don't know these people from a bar of soap, and you end up just connecting with them, I guess, spiritually.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So we've spoken a lot about hardship, but the two places we spoke about you at your best, there's a yoga session and when you're out in the middle batting, irrelevant of what's going on in your life. And the two things that seem to have come up, simplicity, being present, and acknowledging, well, it's essentially being present. So acknowledging the people around you and just flowing with that moment. So almost letting go of trying to control and expecting answers and wanting more, to that ability to actually just let go and be where your feet are. And
yeah.
So people talk a lot about yoga being super hippie. Some love it. And then it's very different from performance. You go into a high performance environment, as we spoke about earlier, it's like, you got to do more, you got to tick more boxes. Let's do S&C, let's do this, let's do that. We'll train for 7 hours a day. It's like, well, what actually brings performance? Like what is high performance? And
yeah, it's a great question.
Well, you don't have to answer that one. It's a really hard one to answer. But that's what we're trying to do with the podcast, I suppose, is try and understand from the best in the world, what does performance look like? And what it sounds like from you is simplicity, presence, flow, enjoyment. And
Yeah.
speaking of the spiritual side, I was very lucky to have you introduce me to Noddy Holder as a batting coach based out of Revos. And he's coached you for a number of years. Very spiritual man. What is it about Noddy that makes him so good?
I think you hit the nail on the head before, and that key word is simplicity. And I think that's something that he's instilled. That's who he is. That's his philosophy as a coach, his philosophy as a person. And I think, what he brings to me is that cricket's a game that we overanalyze, and particularly as batters, we want everything to be correct, technically correct, and we're always looking for more, or we're never really satisfied. And I think Nutty's built his philosophy based on it being the most simplistic way of how to actually construct a batting innings or feel comfortable as a batter. And he talks about you've got four shots, front foot, corridor, pull shot, and then coming down the wicket, or essentially a sweep. But if someone said that to me, like, oh, you're just going to learn 4 shots and that's all you're ever going to need, and that's your little book of how to be a good batter, and you take that with you, I'd be like, that's a joke. Like, there's more to it than that.
It's almost too simple, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm like, no, that's too easy. Like, it's not going to work. And I think over time, when you sort of come in and out of different environments, and you have different experiences with different coaches, as a young player, you take on a lot of information, and you lose sight of, what your base is and what you believe in. And I think I'm a Noddy believer, and I've always resorted back to Noddy at different times in my career when I really needed him the most. And it's almost like I'm going back to my roots. It's like, oh, I've been away, I've been on tour, and I'm going home. I'm going to go see my people that understand me and reconnect me with who I am as a person. And that's what he does. And he's taught me a lot about, like, it's not just batting. Like, everyone's like, what do you do? Like, you're there for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I'm like, and they're like, how many balls do you hit? And I'm like, oh, today may have only hit like 2 buckets. Like, I'm there for an hour and a half. Like, it's just incredible. Like, we've had so many really big moments together that I guess, like, other people would think we're a little bit wanky or whatever, but it's like success for us doesn't really look like hitting the perfect bucket. Success is like, I've come and he's given me his full attention on my worries, my experiences in life, what I'm going through. Then I've done the same to him, and we've connected, and then we've gone and just had a hit and brought that connectivity as people into our session. And I think people don't see that as success, but for us, that's a bloody good session.
That's unreal. But it's exactly what I found as well. Connection, simplicity. I had it for 2 months. That over years is proper mentorship. And from like, you can come in as a coach and know how to hit the perfect cover drive. You can come and even talk about all the mental skills in the world. How do you focus? How do you get your routine perfect? Let's get all these things perfect. But at the end of the day, it sounds like what Noddy did is he just connected with you as a human. He simplified what was happening. It was an outlet to talk, to engage. I'll never forget his laugh. He's got one of the loudest laughs in the world, and he truly just enjoys being with you. The other thing is, you're well known around the world as one of the best players of the short ball. You can whack it, cut, pull. Nicole Bolton, everyone knows you can play it. True or false, you're actually scared of the short ball. And
True.
And how did Noddy help you with that?
So yeah, it's quite interesting because I just remember having this one session with Noddy, and leading into it, I'd actually been hit in the ribs by Lauren Shave. I mean, these bloody fast bowlers that bowl bounces in the indoor centre. I mean, spare me, seriously. So she's hit me, and I've gone down. And I think at this time I was maybe 16 or 17, and I'll never forget this. And Noddy talks about it all the time. So I rock up to a session with Noddy, and I'm like, I don't want to pull. Like, I'm too scared. Like, all I want to do is just defend it or get out of the way. And he's like, well, like, he's renowned for, I guess, making players feel safe enough to be able to face the ball and execute a pull shot. So I was like, all right, let's give it a crack. And anyways, like, being a typical know-it-all, I just kept going back and going, nah, I'm not going to pull it. And he's like, no, like, everyone I put in now, you have to pull it. There's no back foot drive or whatever, you have to pull it. And then I got hit, and then I just kept doing that, and I couldn't stop. So then I just absolutely cracked the shits and walked out of the net, packed up my bag and walked out of Revos. And he just always brings it up, because the thing with the short ball, Barbie, is like, it's more than just executing or practicing a strength. I remember 2 weeks ago, I rocked up for a session with Noddy, and I said to him, we were just connecting, and, you know, like, I had a lot of worries and stress and a lot of complications that I was making life really hard. And he's like, what do you want to do today? And I was like, I think we should do the short ball. And he's like, yeah. He's like, the thing with the short ball is you need trust, and being able to actually face your challenges or your adversity head on in life is hard, let alone when a ball's coming at your head. So I always, whenever I feel like I'm getting a little bit overwhelmed, or I really need to start backing myself and trusting who I am as a person, we go straight back onto the short ball, and he just gets it quicker and quicker and higher and higher. And before you know it, I don't even know what variables are coming down, what pace, what height. All I know is I'm getting into a position to hit the ball, and the rest is history. And then I come out of that session, may have hit 3 buckets, like 40-minute session, and him and I are just on top of the world. And it's a really powerful thing. Everyone talks about the short ball and like being side on, and you don't need to play it. You don't need to play it in women's cricket. No one bounces you, and all this other bullshit. But to me, it actually symbolizes more than just being able to play off your body. It's actually that trust element. And I have always spoken to you about how I have that relationship with my batting in terms of what's going in my life is always happening within my batting sessions, and it's actually quite powerful.
What? That's fascinating. It's just connection. It seems like the word that keeps coming up for me. It's connection in terms of, I've never actually heard anyone talk about at batting like that, but it makes a lot of sense. So what you're essentially saying is that if you're struggling or a bit down day-to-day life, you would go in with Noddy and hit short balls purely because of what it symbolised in terms of it.
Yeah.
It was trust, like trust your base, trust where you are, have the courage to be front on and face your fears, which is essentially that ball coming down at you.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And I've spoken to you about three shots that have really important keys to them. So obviously the pull shot, facing your fears, is all about trust. And then on the front foot, it's being able to have the courage to pick up your hands to want to hit the ball. And then through the corridor, it's getting yourself in a position where you can release your hands. So that symbolises freedom, because you're actually just allowing yourself to go. And I think when I'm thinking about my batting, I think about those trust, courage, and freedom. And I try and resort back to that whenever I feel like I'm having a really off day or things don't make sense. Those are the three key elements to my batting that I want to be able to bring with me wherever I go.
That's brilliant. And that's the crux of the inside edge, I suppose, is using what's already inside of you. It's funny, Justin Langer, I heard a podcast with him on, I think it was Shane Watson's, his T20 podcast. And Justin Langer says he uses the analogy of watch the ball in day-to-day life. And that's something that he uses as a batter. Your only thing you can control out in the middle is watching the ball. So if he's off the field and in life and struggling, or there's a few things going on, watch the ball. And he says to himself over and over again, watch the ball, which essentially means like, what can I control? Just do what you can control. And the best in the world, I'll tell you what, it keeps coming back to that. It's symbolism, it's analogy, it's trusting yourself, not going and ticking a million boxes and getting more and more serious about everything. In saying that, coming back to basics, coming back to connection and roots, after you struggled with depression, walked away from the game, you came back and played for Syndey Sixer Cricket Club, which is where you'd grown up. The Boltons basically are Syndey Sixer Cricket Club with your two older brothers. Alan has never seen without his Syndey Sixer jumper on. How did that impact you, and how did that help you actually on the comeback trail to where you are now?
Yeah, it was when we were talking about my potential return to play with my doctor and my psych, I'd never been so excited about playing a game of cricket than I was when my first club game back. And I think being able to rock up, and I call our girls, like, we're all a bunch of misfits, and I love it. Like, we're all from different walks of life. Everyone's got different purposes and intentions of why they're there, and I find that really refreshing, because someone might just be there to have a beer at the end of the game, or someone might be there to get better, or someone might just like the fact that you get to play cricket with your close mates on a Sunday. I mean, hungover for some of them. but I think for me it was just coming back and having that that connection with the sport that had been so huge to me in my life. And I think I had I didn't put any pressure on myself or what it meant or read into it too much. It was the first time that I'd rock up the club and I'd be excited about wanting to be there. And I think it was such an important cog in my return to being able to play at the highest level, because I think if you don't have passion for the game, then you're never ever gonna go on and I guess want to be successful or enjoy what you're doing. So that passion was there, and it was actually really nice for me to experience, because for so long I thought cricket was the issue. But having a really small moment and working my way back through club, and especially at a club that has been a massive part of my life and my family's life, it was a really, really nice moment.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was playing for Midland Guildford on the receiving end of you winning the 50 over flag. So I'm happy you found your way, but wasn't too happy on that day. And then that was prior to you making your international comeback, is that right?
Yeah.
So we fast forward a bit to last year, the Ashes. So how long were you out of the game for? Was it 18 months? About that?
Yeah, yeah. I think my last game was in December 2018, and then finished playing club cricket in March 2019, and then yeah, like Cricket Australia were incredible in terms of supporting me throughout that whole process. I know there was some series, so I was still contracted. There was a home series on against New Zealand, and they were playing at the Wacker, and I was like, oh man, like, should I be trying to get back for that? I mean, the selfish part of me was like, you know, being able to have that moment of playing for Australia finally in front of my friends and family at my home ground. But I was also pretty adamant that I wasn't ready, and that was really far-fetched for me. But I think we started having conversations around that, and I think that's when I started thinking, well, maybe there's a little bit of a light that still wants to be able to play at this level. I'm not sure if I'd get that opportunity again, and fortunately enough, I was able to get another Aussie contract and get on that tour to the Ashes. And I think for me, just to get back onto the tour was a massive achievement, but I think I put a lot of internal pressure on myself to be able to have that perfect comeback. And I think I thought I was quite well equipped to be able just to pick up where I left. And I was a little bit naive about how I was going to cope in a big series like that again after having such time off. But and we spoke regularly. There was so many things on that tour that I learned about myself, my cricket, and also I guess with how I can cope with my mental health within that professional environment. So even though it didn't really go the way that I envisaged, there was definitely a lot of things that I took out of that experience.
Why is it so hard, do you think, to be able to just let go and trust yourself? So you've gone through this whole period of finding out why you love the game. You're playing for fun, you're enjoying it, you're connected to your roots again, you're enjoying the grind. Why is it so hard to just carry that on once you're at the next level?
Yeah, so many. It's like you create the narrative, and like for me, my narrative walking into that Ashes tour was, I'm going to make so many runs, and how good's this? And like, this is the second chapter of my international career, and it starts to build momentum in your mind. So without even knowing, you're already putting yourself under pressure, and no one else is putting me under pressure except myself. And I think, I think it's really hard because when you're an opening bat and you've failed a few times, you get nervous. You get really nervous because our team, well, we're not the best team in the world for no reason. We've got players that are batting out of position and can bat anywhere. So you feel that constant breathing down your neck if you don't perform. So I think I used to always be like, if I've had 2 lean innings, I need to score on the third, otherwise I'm out. But you know what? Like, this Ashes tour, they backed me to the hill and back. I failed 4 times, and they still made me feel like I was just as important as if I was winning games of cricket. So the narrative that I created was that as soon as I started failing, well, that story wasn't coming true. So then I was like, well, what the hell story is going to happen? And now the story of failure is upon me, and it's gaining momentum, and I can't stop it. And it just gets really, like, you sort of look back and you're just like, oh, the power of the mind. And I just lost that power.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're storytelling machines. Humans are storytelling machines, and everything that you've gone through there is completely normal. Always searching for, well, we want to belong, we want to connect, and we tell stories. And it's pretty much the way you tell stories to yourself defines everything. The hard part is actually doing that, is rewriting the narrative that's going on. And I think that's what you mentioned earlier. It's that self-awareness and personal growth. It's all about trying to rewrite that narrative and owning your own story. So can you, in the hardest environments, when you're under the most pressure, own your story, set your goals, set your vision, and then get after it with no expectations? Like, is that the goal, or is success something else? So what does success actually look like for you?
Yeah, well, I think that's so, it's a big one, because I think, like I've sort of said before, like it's having that, being able to be comfortable with who you are, and that story that we tell ourselves, and actually owning that and going, you know what, like in whatever space I'm put in, or whatever scenario, like I know who I am, and I'm comfortable, and it's good enough, and that's all that matters. And I think us as humans, we have that nature where we like to compare ourselves, our experiences, or always searching for things that are unattainable. So I think success for me is just being really comfortable and clear with who you are on and off the field. Because I'll tell you what, I've had some innings and some sessions where I've been absolutely frazzled as a person, and out in the middle I'm just as frazzled, and I'm literally taken like what's going on off the field onto the field, and wondered why I can't actually see where the ball is. So I think for me, you've hit the nail on the head, is like success has to be like owning who you are and being comfortable of being able to act in that manner in whatever situation or life throws at you.
That's brilliant. And who is Nicole Bolton at her best? Like,
Oof. Who is Nicole Bolton?
Big question.
Yeah, it is. Well, I say sometimes I say that I'm a bit of an introvert, but I would say that when I'm at my best, I'm quite out there, and I do enjoy banter. I love a chat, and I think I talk a lot about, and my family always, and even someone like Noddy, is I have this spark about me. So my eyes can tell a story, and when I'm at my best, and it sounds a bit like, what the hell are you going on about? But when I'm at my best, like my eyes have a spark, and people can almost see into how I'm feeling and what's really going on in my life. And when that spark's not there, and I've got dark circles, and I sort of look a little bit like a lost soul, people can pick up on that. So I think as a person, I'm really readable, and I think when I'm at my best, I've got my spark, and I've got a little bit of something about me. I'm not taking life too seriously, and I think I'm someone that I really love being able to build connections with people, but actually understand who they are as a person. And I've never wanted to do that before. Right. And I think when things aren't going well for me, I don't understand people, because I'm so stuck and fixed in my own shit that I lose that ability to be able to understand what's in front of me. So like when I'm going well, I would say that I'm a really easy person to be able to build a connection with.
I love that. And given that you're probably towards the back end of your career now, seen as a mentor in the WA Women's setup as well, how are you using all the things you've talked about, having that spark, the connection, the need to help others? How are you living that in day-to-day life now?
It's been a bit of a challenge early doors, I think. This is the most amount of time I've spent in the WA program, and I'm a senior player by quite some length. So I think for me, I found it really tough initially, because I lost a little bit of my purpose, and I lost my motivation. And then I've had a lot of conversations with coaches, mentors, and even yourself around, well, things look a little bit different now in my career and in my life, and it's establishing what's my purpose. And I think something that I want to try and make myself accountable to is building those relationships with the younger players and establishing some of the things that I learned along my career to try and help them. And I think I always feel better when I'm helping others. And I know it's a cliche and I know everyone's the same, but sometimes when you're really struggling and you lose that ability to show empathy or understand what someone's going through, you become a worse version of yourself. And I know when I feel myself falling into that trap, I try and remind myself of what my purpose is. And my purpose is, no, I said I was going to do that. I'm going to help these kids. I'm going to build a connection, and I'm actually going to get them to know, like Nicole Bolton, not just the cricketer that they've played against or trained with, but actually have it go two ways. And I think that really brings a lot of energy and life back into me. And I think it's something that I can also take into everyday life is being able to see outside of my own tunnel vision at times, and especially when things get tough, because I think we're all guilty when things get really tough. We can't see the light, and I think it's just trying to find little things within your day that give you that purpose and that perspective of where you want to sit as a person.
Love it. That's unreal. And just to finish off, the question, why do you play cricket, gets thrown around a lot. And I reckon those motivations change throughout most people's careers. Where you are now, you've been on one hell of a journey, constantly learning, constantly growing. Why are you playing at the moment? What's motivating?
Oh, yeah, Barbie, that's a good question. Why am I playing at the moment? Because there's nothing else to do. No, just kidding. Because I'm not fit enough to play AFL. No, just kidding. Look, I think I still haven't mastered a lot of things within the cricket space, and I think while I'm still, like my body's good and my mind's in an okay place, like I feel like I can really build a bit of a legacy over here in WA and hopefully help the next generation of players come through. And I think for me, anytime that I get to represent WA, like kind of sends like chills down my spine, you know, like I just love the state so much. They've given so much to me. So to still be able to represent them later on in my career and spend more time actually in the program, it's been a bit of a blessing in disguise, and I think it's actually going to prolong my career a little bit. And then in terms of, I mean, there's always that little carrot that you're thinking, is your international career over? Is there still opportunities? And I think with the 50 over World Cup being postponed, that was originally something that was sort of motivating me maybe a little bit. But now that that's been, I'm sort of in a place where just for the first time ever, I'm just playing cricket for what it is. And I'm not really thinking about trying to perform to get back to play here. I'm merely just trying to make sure that whatever skills I learn in this environment are going to leave me in a really good place, that when I eventually walk away, I'm going to be a better person for the experience. So, and I also think that I've learned a lot over the last few months being involved in this program on a full-time basis, because I'm forever learning how to manage my emotions and my health in a high performance environment. And I think, I'm 31 and I still have really shit days, and I still can't sometimes bring myself out of them in a training environment. So I still feel like I've got a lot of things that I can still learn about myself while I've got the help to be able to do that. And I think it's going to make me will hopefully a better cricketer, but more importantly, a better person as well.
Unreal. Well, Bolts, thank you for being so vulnerable, so open, so courageous. You're one of my first mentors. You taught me what hard work really means in those dungeons of Revo Fitness training with John Stojkovski. It's been an absolute pleasure watching you progress through your career, but more importantly, seeing how much you've grown, how self-aware you've become, and how much an impact you really do have on others. Whether you see it or not directly, you've had a huge impact in the cricket world, as well as female athletes and Australian sport in general. So thank you for your time and all the best in the future.
Thanks, Barbie, and about bloody time you got this thing up.
Cheers, pal. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to continue to be part of the Inside Edge project, hit subscribe or leave a comment below. We're also on all major social media platforms. I look forward to having you along next time.